Welcome to Crime Stories of Pakistan with your host, Jehan.
And Naz.
We hope you're enjoying our episodes, and if you are, don't forget to follow us and press the heart button. I want to give a big shout out to Abi Hussein for suggesting this case. Thank you so much for your support and patience. We truly hope our coverage does justice to Shafilea Ahmed's story. So, a heartfelt thanks to Abi Hussein for highlighting this important case. Without further ado, let's dive into the episode. On Liverpool Road in Warrington, a chilling mystery unfolded on the 11th of September 2003. 17-year-old Shafila Ahmed, a young Muslim girl, was reported missing. Detective Chief Inspector Jones led the investigation, but faced a wall of silence. Quote, her family are very private and have asked us to respect their privacy. They have told us her brother and sisters are considerably upset. Unquote. The only glimmer of insight came from Shafila's sister, A, who recounted waking up at 7 a.m. British summertime to discover Shafila missing, along with her bags. But this wasn't the first time Shafila was missing. Was Shafila merely a runaway teenager navigating the challenging waves of adolescence? Or did her disappearance conceal a darker, more sinister truth? Iftikhar Ahmed Shafila's father was a man who defied convention from an early age. Born in Pakistan, but uprooted to Britain at the tender age of 10, he embraced the Western culture with open arms, much to the dismay of his conservative Muslim family. Breaking away from his traditions, he pursued relationships with white girls and ultimately chose to marry for love over arranged marriage, which were typical in his culture. During a visit to his family in Denmark, Iftikhar crossed paths with Vivi Lone Andersen, a young Danish woman who became his wife in 1982. Despite the cultural differences, their relationship blossomed, culminating in the birth of their son, Tony Anderson. Vivi Lone warmly reminisces about Iftikhar, affectionately known as Baza. He exuded carefree energy, and his days were brimming with dance parties and visits to trendy discos. Adorned in snug jeans and stylish glasses with a beer in hand, he effortlessly charmed those around him as he danced and mingled in these vibrant settings. But beneath this vivacious exterior lay a different side. A different aspect of his personality emerged, especially in the presence of his Pakistani relatives. In 1985, tragedy struck when Iftikhar's grandmother, who was back in their village in Gujarat, which is a rural village in Pakistan, fell seriously ill. This prompted Iftikhar to return home to be with her during her final days. After several months of Iftikhar being in Pakistan, he eventually reached out to Vivi Lone, urging her to join him in Bradford with their son, because before they were in Denmark. He promised a fresh start, a new beginning for their family in the bustling city of Bradford. Bradford is celebrated for its diverse populace and cultural legacy. The city's cultural fabric is woven with the traditions of South Asian communities, mainly Pakistani and Indians, which is evident in its cuisine, festivals, and bustling markets. Upon their arrival in Bradford, Vivi Lone and Tony were greeted by Iftikhar and his visibly pregnant cousin Farzana.
Hold on. I want to make sure I get this right. So, if the guy married his cousin based on tradition of arranged marriages, but he had a thing with a white lady?
He's married to Vivi Lone.
Oh, so then who's this Farzana lady?
Exactly. So Vivi
Mm,
Lone, he calls her because he's in Pakistan. He says, leave Denmark, come with our son. Let's live in Bradford. Let's start our life.
mm.
When Vivi Lone and Tony end up in Bradford, they're greeted with Iftikhar plus his cousin who is pregnant.
Okay.
Now she has no clue, okay, who is this?
Mm,
But barely a month later, during a routine house call by a health visitor, Iftikhar finally confessed to Vivi Lone that the unborn child Farzana was carrying was his.
wow.
He revealed that he and Farzana had married in Pakistan. He stated that it was a bond forged in their childhood when he was 4 without his consent. And this is very common.
Yeah, it is common.
From a very young age, unfortunately, cousins are betrothed to one another without their consent. So, Vivi Lone, she mentioned that Iftikhar confided in her, expressing his sense of obligation in marrying Fazana. Quote, he explained to me that if he had not married her, she did not want to marry anyone else. She would kill herself if he didn't marry her in Pakistan, and so he did it. Unquote.
Okay, but he married her. Does that mean he has to impregnate her?
Hmm. But that's the thing about the Desi culture. First, they grind you to get married, and when that is done, it's like, okay, now have kids.
But I don't think anybody put a gun to Iftikhar's head and said, do this.
But I'm pretty sure his grandmother, who passed away, which is why he had gone back to Pakistan, I'm sure she must have played some emotional card of, I'm dying. This is my last dying wish. Get married. I want to see you guys settled with a child. You know, Desi culture is a bit like that.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think over here it's crucial to clarify that Islam does permit up to 4 marriages under specific circumstances, such as if a man's wife is unable to conceive or fulfill her marital duties due to a chronic illness. But Islam also emphasizes that one, you must obtain permission from any previous wives, and two, one can remarry if all wives are treated equally, fairly, and compassionately. However, it's essential to acknowledge that interpretations of religious teachings can sometimes be manipulated or misused. In the context of Islam allowing multiple wives, there are instances where this permission is exploited for convenience rather than being practiced in accordance with the intended principles.
Yeah, but he never got permission from Vivi.
Hmm. Yeah, no. And that's something that we're just going to get to.
Okay.
Vivi Lone's world shattered upon learning of Iftikhar's hidden marriage, a betrayal that struck her to the core. She explained, quote, Farzana was pregnant at the time, so he was in deep trouble. He knew that if I went to the British police, which I could have easily done, he would have been thrown out. Unquote. Expressing uncertainty about the legality of having 2 wives in Britain, she added, quote, I don't know the rules in Britain about having 2 wives because we were still married at the time. Unquote. But after 5 years of marriage and with their son to consider, Vivi Lone made the courageous decision to return to Denmark. And brace yourself, Naz. When Vivi Lone informed Iftikhar of leaving with their son, he did not contest her decision. Instead, he expressed a troubling sentiment, stating that he could allow his son to grow up without his influence because he was a boy.
Oh God. Double standards.
He went on to assert that if they had a daughter, he would have felt compelled to ensure her upbringing strictly adhered to Islamic principles under his guidance.
I don't even know what to say to that. So frustrating.
So he's a boy, and it's okay. You can take our son, you can go. But had this been a daughter, I would raise her the Islamic way, aka my way. Can you believe that?
It's so upsetting that people have this mindset. And the sad reality is that a lot of people have this mindset.
Yeah, unfortunately. Whether you're living in Pakistan or abroad, I don't know. It's just the Pakistani mindset. And it's not a religious thing. I think it's a cultural, traditional aspect of it.
It's definitely not a religious thing. Yep.
Yeah. So, following Vivi Lone and Tony's departure, Iftikhar and Vivi Lone divorced. Iftikhar never provided financial support for his son Tony, nor did he maintain any contact with him. And that was the end of it. Iftikhar and Farzana remained in Bradford. After a period of dating white women, marrying a white woman, and indulging in activities like drinking and partying, Iftikhar suddenly desired to embrace a traditional Pakistani lifestyle in the UK. His wife Farzana echoed his sentiments. Born and raised in Pakistan, she upheld the very values Iftikhar now sought for his wife and future children. It's hypocrisy at its peak. With limited English proficiency and having never traveled outside Pakistan before, Farzana took on the role of a traditional housewife in the UK. She adhered to the expectations of a Pakistani wife, where women typically follow the head of the household, the man, without voicing any disagreement. Her responsibilities included cooking, managing the house, caring for the children, and of course, tending to her husband. Meanwhile, Iftikhar, who had secured his employment as a taxi driver, swiftly adjusted to his new life with Farzana as if nothing had happened. Like, leave alone who? Who, Tony?
Totally, he's totally forgotten about his past.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say it, but it's like he quote unquote settled down. You know what I mean? Like he left his old ways behind and now he has a conservative wife. So now he has to be a typical Pakistani man, I guess. Pakistani
Mm-hmm.
husband.
Yeah. Because I think with Vivi Lone, because she was from Denmark, it still allowed him to break the chains of that conservative mindset. And there was
Yeah.
always her reminding him, okay, I can understand this is what's done there in Pakistan, but we're here, we're in Denmark. Let it go, or loosen up. But when you have a wife from Pakistan, brought up in Pakistan, first time in the UK,
Mm.
everything in UK is odd. And so you're holding on to whatever little tradition, norm, culture you have within the setting of your home.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just wanted to make a note over here that Iftikhar's reputation as a taxi driver, it suffered due to his volatile temper. Reports surfaced of him verbally abusing and physically assaulting customers who couldn't provide exact change for their rides.
Um,
But somehow, none of these reports resulted in him facing consequences for his actions. And it's truly astonishing that he wasn't held accountable given the gravity of his actions.
did he ever physically assault anyone?
Yeah, but no one
He still
pressed
didn't
any
get charged?
charges. No.
Wow. He got lucky.
But it's important to kind of keep that in mind. So he has a really bad temper. He has a habit of acting out, like physically hurting another when things don't go his way or when he's in a state of anger.
Hmm.
So just remember that.
Okay.
Shafila Ahmed was born on the 14th of July 1986 in Bradford. Soon after her birth, she moved to Warrington with her parents. Over time, Iftikhar and Farzana expanded their family, welcoming three more daughters and a son into their home. The details I'm about to share is to help our listeners understand the environment in which Shafila and her sisters were raised. Shafila and her sisters shared a room, while Junaid, the brother, had a room to himself. And remember, they're like four sisters sharing one room.
Four sisters are sharing one room,
Hmm.
so I'm assuming they have a three-bedroom home or apartment or whatever.
I don't know what their house size was, but it was half a portion.
My goodness.
But this arrangement itself highlights the gender bias prevalent in the household, as it clearly reflects the unequal treatment based on gender.
Yeah, absolutely. Very obvious.
Mm.
At the same time, I don't know how appropriate from a cultural perspective it would be to have a brother share a room with a sister.
No, I get that. But four sisters in one room was more for control.
Oh, I thought it was a space constraint.
Mm-mm. Shafila and her sisters were expected to adhere to strict rules inside and outside their home. After returning from school, they were required to change into their traditional Pakistani attire, the shalwar kameez, which ensured that every inch of their bodies was covered. They had to prioritize household chores over their schoolwork. And then
Hmm.
Shafila, because she was the eldest, she faced the brunt of these expectations the most. She would wake up early to prepare breakfast for the family. Then she would make lunches for her siblings. She would wash the dishes. She would tidy the kitchen before then rushing to go and get ready for school.
Wow, it's a lot of responsibility. What's the mom doing now in this case? She's just chilling?
Because I think in a Desi family, you want to teach your girls from a very young age that at the end of the day, this is what their life really is about: cleaning, cooking, looking after everyone else.
It's funny you say that because inherently a woman, when she gets married or has a family, kind of learns that responsibility and learns how to care for her family. But for those parents who have the mindset that this is ultimately what you're going to do, so we're going to teach it to you at a very young age, I
Hmm.
think it takes away their innocence and it takes away any opportunity they would have to have a career or, um, move away from the traditional gender roles.
Hmm.
So I know where this is going. I can sense this.
Hmm.
And it's already looking like the setup of this family is it's basically set up for destruction. That's what I can pick up.
Hmm. Yeah, you've got that right. I think you're aware of how they see communities' mindset works. So I think what we need to remember is that at the end of the day, they are from a very small rural village in Pakistan, where if you are in Pakistan itself, these duties are given to children, girls, from a very young age. School is not a priority. And then when you add that element of being abroad, being away from Pakistan, I feel parents like Iftikhar and Farzana, the level of control is at such a intensity because you want to hold on to those values that it becomes stricter, harder, more intense than what it would if they were back in Pakistan. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think one thing that I've learned just from my own family is that if you're coming abroad, if you're moving out of Pakistan, you have to adapt to the local culture, the local norms. Yes, you maintain some of your own, definitely, but everything can't be done the way it was done back home. Because if that is the case, then why even bother to move away from Pakistan, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's something that I battled with throughout this case. Even when I was researching it, it's just like if you wanted so much of the Pakistani traditions and norms, you should have stayed in Pakistan because
Yeah,
all you're
agreed.
doing is suffocating your children, not your boys, just
Hmm.
just the girls, just your daughters.
Yeah, and that's unfair.
And I also kind of want to say that the mindset that you come from, where you are Pakistani but living abroad, have lived abroad your whole life, do all Pakistanis who are living abroad share that same mindset?
Probably not,
Hmm.
but I would have to say I think it's kept all of us grounded, and I think it's
Mhm.
kept us somewhat normal
Hmm.
and even successful, I have to say. I mean, gratefully, by the grace of God, but and I think in this specific case, because obviously you're covering a case, so there's going to be a crime here,
Hmm.
um, there already seems to be many red flags.
Hmm. Yeah. Because when I was also researching this case, I'm like, I'm from Pakistan. I live here. I went to university for 4 years, but I came back. I was never brought up this way. It's foreign to me.
Hmm.
So, okay, so also all those household duties that the daughters had, especially Shafila being the eldest, I wanted to just make a note over here that Junaid was exempted from any such household responsibilities.
Yep, I can see that.
Hmm.
He's probably exempt because the mindset is that, well, his wife will do all of that,
Mm-hmm.
which is just so frustrating.
He's the man. He doesn't need to. And I haven't even begun to detail the house rules, but it offers an insight into the mindset of Iftikhar and Farzana. So obviously, Shafila and her sisters, they were enrolled in school, but it was co-ed. They were strictly forbidden from interacting with boys in any capacity, which is like this logic behind this expectation of not talking to boys being in a co-ed is puzzling.
It's also upsetting given the fact that we already know of Iftikhar's history
Mm-hmm.
and what he did. So, again, double standard
Mm-hmm.
where the girls aren't even allowed to talk to any
Mm-hmm.
boys, yet the father got to have his fun in his youth time, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the sad reality. I don't even think the girls have any idea about their father's past.
No, I don't think so. Just like you said, Iftikhar has a very colorful past, but it's he takes it a step further, Naz. So not only is he not allowed, they're not allowed to talk to boys, but Shafila's parents went to great lengths to control who her female friends should be, forbidding her from befriending, quote, white girls. Iftikhar asserted that associating with the local girls was shameful. Just like you said, did you not forget that you dated and then even married a foreigner?
This reminds me a lot of the case that I previously covered. And I feel
Hmm.
like there's going to be even more overlap. The Aqsa Pervaz case.
Yeah. Yeah. So, not only was she prohibited from speaking to boys, but she was also forbidden from interacting with the locals, even though she attended a local school where the majority of her peers were likely to be British. I think it's important to say over here that this isn't just Iftikhar's view. Within the Muslim community, integrating with people from different backgrounds, especially locals, was often seen as dishonorable. Those who attempted to bridge cultural divides were frequently labeled as too westernized or accused of losing touch with their cultural roots. And this isn't about religion, it's about a cultural and traditional mindset that is deeply outdated. If you don't want your children to integrate with the local community, then perhaps it's better to raise them in a culture where your values are the norm, which is
Yeah,
something that
agreed.
we have said before.
Mhm.
And then to take it a step further, her father's unreasonable extremism extended to extracurricular activities too. None of his daughters were allowed to participate in swimming due to the self imposed religious restrictions, and this was probably because of the swimwear. But you have alternatives like all girls pools or modest swimwear, which could have been an option. But this is yet another example of the suffocating and oppressive control he held over his daughters' lives.
I feel like it's just gonna get worse.
It does get worse, unfortunately. And I just have to say, Junaid has zero restrictions, no expectations of household chores, zero pressure of upholding their family's honor because he's a boy. This level of control makes me truly believe that her parents viewed their girls as commodities. Girls are conditioned to obey their father's authority, uphold his reputation and honor, and excel in domestic duties. All of this is done in preparation for their eventual roles as wives, who are expected to take care of their husbands and his family needs. And although I have to say over here again that these beliefs are not representative of all Pakistani men. I am one of three sisters. Naz is one of three sisters. My father never subjected us to these traditional expectations ever. What about you, Naz?
Never. Both my parents were fluid in the sense that they adapted really well to the good teachings of Canadian society and
Mhm.
also reminded us of how to stay grounded and reminded us of our culture and our religion from time to time. And after a certain age, they stopped doing that too because they realized that we're old enough to make decisions, hopefully good decisions, on our
Mhm.
own.
So, daughters raised in a Western environment but expected to adhere strictly to their family's traditional customs must probably navigate a challenging and high pressured environment. These conflicting expectations can be confusing and stifling, as outdated traditions impede their personal growth and independence. While preserving cultural heritage is important, the extreme measures some parents adopt can be very harsh, very toxic, and brutally unfair. And in my view, this approach represents a missed opportunity to foster a more balanced and accepting approach towards cultural integration. But like I mentioned, a lot of Desi parents who live abroad don't want that cultural integration.
If they don't want the integration, then it poses the question again of why even move outside of Pakistan?
Hmm. Yeah. Then stay in Pakistan. Perhaps it was due to this overwhelming sense of control that suffocated Shafila and led her at just 12 years old to flee her home on March 10th, 1998, with her sister A. When her parents reported them missing, the police were quick to act, and thankfully, the girls were found safe and returned home the same day. It's hard to fathom the intense feeling of restriction that would drive such young children to see running away as their only escape. And the restrictions Don't stop. Shafila also faced strict limitations in regard to her school uniform. Her father insisted she wear pants instead of skirts.
We already know that her parents have a very, very conservative mindset. So I have to say, I'm not really surprised about this
Mhm.
skirt wearing issue.
Yeah. But it was just if if you look at everything that they're controlling, so what you wear, who you speak to, where you go, what extracurricular activities you do, what you do at home, what you do outside home, it's like how do they breathe?
And they have to take those drastic measures of running away.
Hmm.
I can just imagine the tension in the household and stricter rules and punishment, especially for these two who try to escape from their household.
Hmm. Yeah. But I do want to add a little bit of positivity to this. Shafila, despite all of this, she did manage to integrate into the British society, though she kept this part of her life well hidden from her family. She was popular among her classmates. She had a close circle of friends who were non Muslims. And being born and brought up in the UK, the Western culture did influence her. Everything that her Desi parents perceived as threatening or shameful, she was kind of doing. Shafila's close friends spoke fondly of her, recalling her as an exceptional friend who always prioritized the well being of others, regardless of her own challenges. They shared insights into Shafila's character. Quote, we would cry together, laugh together, and even rush through last minute homework before the next period. Although that wasn't very often, as she always completed hers on time. Unquote. Another friend remarked, Shafila was a caring, high spirited, and brave young lady who, even in her toughest times, remained positive and hopeful that she would one day live the peaceful and happy life she deserved. Unquote. Yet another said, quote, Shafila had a great sense of humor, a vibrant personality, and a contagious smile. She truly lit up a room with her presence. Unquote. Through these quotes, Shafila's friends paint a vivid picture of a remarkable young girl whose kindness, resilience, and joyful spirit profoundly touched their lives. And although her parents' controlling began from the time she was born, as she reached her teenage years, no amount of control could fully restrain her. So she was labeled rebellious.
Just like Aqsa Pervaz.
Yeah, just like Aqsa Pervaz. Teenagers often find ways to navigate difficult circumstances, especially since discovering one's individuality and friendships become central to their lives during this stage. So, in order to maintain the little independence she had, during her time in school, Shafila stored her Western attire, false nails, jewelry, and makeup in her school locker. She was very, very fond of makeup, by the way.
Which is typical for a teenager, right?
Right. Innocent personal interests. She would
Hmm.
change from her traditional attire to Western clothing upon arriving to school and change back into her Eastern attire before returning home. And just to clarify, her Western attire always consisted of three-fourth sleeve shirts and pants. Nothing revealing, nothing inappropriate, but yet they had issues with it. However, Shafila found a way to balance honoring her cultural heritage at home while still being able to express her individuality in public settings. However, Desi communities are the biggest snitches and cannot see anyone happy. So, unfortunately, this balance she tried creating was often jeopardized by other members of the Pakistani community reporting her actions to her parents and labeling her behavior as shameful.
I think in theory, you think it would be easy to live a double life,
Mhm.
but in reality, it's got to be very difficult because you're always going to run into somebody that knows somebody or somebody that knows your family. and then your secret is no longer a secret. Back in my high school, I can remember there were some girls who came from conservative families and they were expected to wear the hijab, so the headscarf. And
Hmm.
it wasn't necessarily a choice of their own, it was more so imposed by the families.
Hmm.
So I do know of girls that would come to school with the hijab on, take it off for the entire duration of the school day,
Hmm.
and then put their hijab on before it was time to go home. So I was never one to snitch on girls like that,
Hmm.
but I can guarantee of those girls, I'm sure a majority of them, their parents must have heard complaints.
Of
But
course.
I think I've seen both situations where after parents have heard the complaints, they've done things as drastic as sending their kids back to Pakistan and trying to
Hmm.
correct their behavior and to have them more cultured and more, I guess, religion focused. But I've
Hmm.
also seen other cases where the children ended up rebelling even further
Hmm.
and they went a whole other extreme and the parents couldn't do anything about it. So in both of these scenarios, I would say it's hard either way. So the best thing always is to pick a middle ground where if only the parents could understand that there's only so much you can try to force your kids, but at some point
Hmm.
you just have to let go.
Yeah. And whether you wear a hijab or not, whether you wear Eastern or Western attire, none of it should be attached to shame or dishonor because it's not. It is not shameful. It is not dishonorable when all you're trying to do as a teenager is to adapt to your surroundings, adapt to the culture around you. You're just discovering yourself, you're exploring yourself. I mean, it's natural and it's essential for you to do that. I think it's actually shameful to force a teenager to conform to rigid cultural expectations. And I think what parents fail to see, whether they see or not, whether living in Pakistan or living abroad, true parental guidance doesn't it comes from being a positive role model, providing support, and it does not come from oppression, manipulation, and punishment. But unfortunately, Desi families don't understand that. So anything they can't control, anything that is against their norms and traditions, it's labeled westernized, shameful, dishonorable. They'll say, you've forgotten your roots, you've forgotten your culture. For what? For just discovering your personal interests?
It's a sad time that we live in. But funny enough, it's not just now. This has been happening for generations. And I can foresee it continuing later as well because sometimes children that grew up in that sort of conservative mindset, or sorry, in that conservative family, the conservative household, they do end up becoming super conservative. And then that's how the expectation carries in with their own children. It's basically a problem that lives on and on and on.
Yeah. It goes on for generations. It is toxic. It is unnecessary. It is not shameful to raise girls thinking that they are independent, feeling independent, and giving them that independence. It is not dishonorable. You need to be that change, right? So even if you
Mhm.
come from a conservative background and you have been blessed to live around a culture which is slightly more open, I think the biggest advantage of you living abroad is to adapt where you can and implement it in the way you bring up your daughters so that it changes. Someone or the other has done it with, when it comes to your family, your dad or his father, he brought that change, right? My grandfather bought that change, which went on with my dad, which is why it's so difficult for me being in Pakistan to even connect to Shafila's parents because these are all normal things.
Yeah, I agree.
So far, I've described an environment marked by control, suffocation, and oppression. Now I need to address the physical abuse Shafila endured from her parents. Please
Oh
be
my goodness,
aware.
I didn't even
Mm,
think that that was an element.
yeah. Please be aware that from now on, the content being shared may be triggering for some. During Shafila's time at school, her friends and teachers were witnesses to her distress, often seeing her arrive in tears. She recounted incidents of her mother's physical abuse, describing instances where she was slapped and had objects like slippers thrown at her. Shafila bravely confided in her teachers about her mother's threats, revealing her desire to control and break her spirit. One particularly disturbing threat involved her mother eagerly anticipating Shafila's trip to Pakistan, where she vowed to teach her a lesson by forcing her into an unwanted marriage.
Oh wow. And at this point, Shafila is still a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like that's the last way that a family can control their child by basically controlling or deciding who their daughter marries.
Mm-hmm. And just like you said, the the incident where you said where a lot of girls would take off their hijab and then go back home and put their hijab back on, and some of them were sent back to Pakistan. It's their way of saying, okay, our hands are done with you now. We're sending you off to Pakistan. You go live there, live in that. And the culture and environment is so different from where you've come from. It's foreign to you living abroad. It's actually a punishment. It's
Yeah,
scary.
exactly. You said it. It's like a punishment.
Yeah. This extreme measure showcased the lengths her parents were willing to go to enforce their authority and kill her individuality. Adding to Shafila's anguish, her mother Farzana would cruelly taunt her by insinuating that she was adopted, implying that her desire for independence stemmed from her not being her biological child.
Wait, hold on. What? Her mother is saying that she's adopted?
It's a taunt made by a lot of Desi parents that, oh, the way you're behaving, it's so unlike how I have brought you up, and you're probably not mine. It's to hurt
Yeah, that's just dumb
Shafila.
to hurt her. Exactly.
And all just because she just wanted a little independence. She just wanted to fit in. So you're making her feel like, oh my God, what you're doing is so severe. It's so damaging to our family, our honor, our reputation. You're not mine. You can't be mine. You can't be my child. You can't be my blood.
Yeah, emotional blackmail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said it. This emotional manipulation further isolated Shafila, making her feel abnormal for simply wanting to lead a normal life and express herself freely. And Naz, have you ever dyed your hair or painted your nails when you were in school?
Oh yeah, a number of times. I always used to have my nails painted. And hair dyeing, I wasn't always a fan of, but it's not to say that I never did it. Still did
Mm.
it.
So it's very normal, right? For a
Yeah,
teenager to paint their nails or.
I can't say every, but a lot of teenage girls want to do those things.
Mhm. But for Shafila, her innocent attempts of self expression, such as dyeing her hair, wearing false nails, were met with aggression from her mother, Farzana. Rather than seeing them as harmless acts of personal interest, her mother viewed them as defiance. Farzana responded by aggressively compelling her to wash her hair and forcefully removing her false nails. To make matters worse, Farzana resorted to hurtful name calling, labeling Shafila a slut, prostitute, and whore because of it. Can you imagine that? Being called a whore, a prostitute, a slut because you painted your nails, because you dyed your hair, because you wore fake nails?
People like this don't deserve to live abroad. You know what I mean? I don't know who allowed them to leave their rural village in Pakistan. They should have stayed there.
And by the way, all of this is while, like, I just cannot get the fact that Iftikhar during his time did triple the amount of what Shafila is doing. She is just expressing herself, discovering herself. He slept around with girls. He drank. He was partying in discos. So this is nothing compared to what Iftikhar has done. And look at what Shafila has to suffer
Yeah,
because of
but
just,
Jihan, Iftikhar is a man, right? He's allowed.
yeah, yeah, that's true. But I cannot imagine being physically abused or mentally abused or even insulted over something as trivial as hair dye or fake nails.
I don't think we can ever understand the mindset of those types of parents who have these sort of restrictions and enforce those kinds of rules in their families. Like we will never be able to understand that.
I'm so glad that we will not.
Yeah, exactly.
Shafila's family would isolate her whenever she stepped out of line, locking her in a room without food or water. They even involved her younger siblings into participating in the abuse, although they secretly provided her food. This tactic of isolation was frequently used following severe beatings to force her into compliance with their rules and expectations. Sometimes the isolation would last for days, sometimes weeks, sometimes even months. Can you imagine the daily physical and mental torment Shafila must be enduring? And then by isolating her, they make her question herself. This cycle of beating and isolating would lead anyone to doubt themselves, even if they haven't done anything wrong. So
Mental torture.
they have a room for like isolation, but they still keep all four of their daughters in the same room.
It's funny you mentioned that because if they had the space, then absolutely it was just a control method of putting all four daughters in one room.
Yeah. Despite the physical and emotional abuse Shafila endured at home, school provided a much needed escape. Within that refuge, her German teacher, Joanne Code, emerged as a beacon of hope. Sensing something amiss beneath Shafila's quiet demeanor, Joanne made a habit of checking in on her, offering a compassionate ear and a comforting presence. Joanne expressed that Shafila was a very quiet young lady who didn't draw attention to herself. Shafila found comfort in Joanne and she bravely shared the brutality she was enduring at home. In October 2002, Shafila suddenly vanished from her classroom for an entire month. This deepened Joanne's concern for her. Determined to find out the cause of Shafila's absence, she reached out to Iftikhar. She called him. Joanne was taken aback by Iftikhar's chillingly indifferent response. Dismissing Shafila's absence from school as insignificant and chosen by Shafila herself, he callously instructed Joanne to burn her books.
Oh wow. Meaning she probably wasn't going to be returning at all.
Joanne said, quote, "It really did not stack up at all with the student that I knew and her aspirations for what she wanted to be," unquote. During that phone call, Joanne requested to speak to Shafila directly. With a sense of urgency, Joanne instructed Shafila to respond only with yes or no. Quote, "Do I need to be worried about your welfare?" Joanne asked. Yes, Shafila responded. Joanne immediately alerted the school authorities of Shafila's flight, revealing that she was being forcibly confined at home and denied access to her education. Prompt action was taken, and the school intervened by addressing the issue with her father. Eventually, he relented, permitting Shafila to resume her studies. The following day, Shafila appeared at school. Joanne noticed faded bruises on her neck and a cut on her lip. When questioned, Shafila disclosed that her parents had subjected her to a brutal physical assault, taking turns to restrain her while the other inflicted the blows.
Oh my God.
And I just need to mention that during my research, I discovered that even when Shafila missed just a few days of school, it was because her parents had beaten her and they withheld her from returning until her wounds had healed. On the 25th of November 2002, Shafila Ahmed ran away from home again, prompting her parents to report her missing. She was subsequently found in a park with her bags, where she had been spending time with a friend. Following her discovery, a meeting was arranged between Shafila, her parents, and the school to address the situation. But after spending a night with a friend, they came to some agreement and Shafila returned home.
Mm.
And if you're wondering, why did she go back home? I'm quite certain that every time Shafila ran away and her parents intervened, they made her feel guilty. Everything she stood for was deemed shameful and dishonorable, damaging their reputation within the Desi community. For a Muslim girl to be independent, ambitious, free spirited, and to question traditions was unheard of and seen as a direct challenge to her parents. Love bombing, guilt, and emotional manipulation are tactics Desi parents often use to force compliance. As a result, Shafila kept returning home, hoping for a change, but likely bracing herself for even harsher punishments. So now, by this time, Shafila is in college for A levels with the ambition of studying law, while her classmates navigated the typical challenges of academic life. Shafila struggled with a reality far darker than any textbook could convey. However, her growing independence threatened her parents' fragile egos, leading to a surge in the intensity of abuse within the confines of her home. Shafila also had mentioned that she endured multiple incidences where her parents resorted to threatening her with a knife. On 3rd Feb 2003, Shafila ran away from home again and chose to stay with a friend. On the 5th of February 2003, she registered herself as homeless, citing her fear of being forced into an arranged marriage in Pakistan. Notice how previously she ran away due to the beatings and torture inflicted by her parents? Now her concerns have shifted to the fear of being forced into marriage.
Why didn't Shafila go to the police?
I think we can't really understand what her mind frame is, but I mean, I cannot imagine being Shafila in Shafila's shoes, but I could never report my parents, no matter how bad they are to me, to the police. I couldn't,
I suppose.
right? Yeah.
I suppose.
The registration and the signed document highlighted her urgent need for help and concerns about her future. But her request for assistance was denied by social services.
I wonder why.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of people failed Shafila, unfortunately. On the 10th of Feb 2003, social services arranged a meeting with Shafila's parents, the school, and Joanne. Joanne described Shafila as frightened and concerned, not only about the prospect of being forced into marriage, but also about the welfare of her siblings. So maybe she went back for her siblings to protect the rest of her sisters.
Possibly.
The specifics of the agreement reached during the meeting are unclear, but it appears her father may have promised not to act against her will. Nevertheless, Shafila returned home with her parents that day. And I feel it's important to say this. Shafila showed remarkable courage despite being raised in a culture that values silence and compliance. Her parents were angered by both her resistance to their control and her openness about the abuse she endured at home, which was culturally unacceptable. We do not air our dirty laundry outside. Even though she was
Mm.
aware of the harsh consequences awaiting her return, she continued to speak out about her mistreatment. Unfortunately, the more she voiced her struggles, the harsher the abuse became. Despite this, she remained hopeful for a positive resolution with her family. And this says so much about Shafila and the person she was. It was very necessary to point it out. A few months after that, in 2003, Shafila's family planned a trip to Pakistan for a relative's wedding. But getting Shafila to agree to the journey proved challenging. Remember her mother's threats of getting her married in Pakistan?
Mm.
To ensure her participation, the parents took a drastic step. Iftikhar, who had been prescribed sleeping pills for his insomnia, crushed the medication and mixed it into a glass of fruit juice. Shafila drank the altered juice, falling into a deep sleep. And when she woke up, she was in Pakistan.
No way.
Mhm.
How did she get through the airport completely asleep?
Drowsy. We don't know the details of how it happened.
So you were right when you
They.
said authorities failed her because
Mhm.
customs should have not let a passenger through, like outside of the UK, if they were in that state. It just
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense.
Hmm. And also, I think it's a different time as well. 2003. I don't know how strict airport laws were or how strict generally the atmosphere was. I don't know, but
Mm.
unaware of the true purpose behind the trip, Shafila was about to face a reality far greater than she could imagine. So stay tuned for part 2 of Unseen Agony on Crime Stories of Pakistan to discover what awaited Shafila when she arrived in Pakistan.
Oh my goodness.
So what do you think so far, Naz?
I feel really bad for Shafila because she's had it rough and I feel like it's only gonna get worse. Poor girl.
It's not going to end well.
Hmm.
But again, thank you so much, Abi Hussein, for suggesting this case. Naz, take it away.
And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share our channel. And please, please, please spread the word to your friends and family about Crime Stories of Pakistan. And for anybody who wants to leave us a review or comments, feedback, case suggestions, you can send us an email at crimestoriesofpakistan@hotmail.com. So this is Naz and Jihan signing off. But don't forget to keep your hearts open, your minds sharp, and your choices clever. See you next time. Bye.